Dead men tell no tales, but their ships speak volumes. Welcome to the Cursed Compass, where we explore the darkest maritime mysteries. On the night of February 4th, 1963, a massive winter storm was tearing through the Gulf of Mexico. Northerly winds whipped up to 46 knots, and 16-foot waves battered any vessel caught out in the dark. Roughly 200 miles west of the Florida Keys, the SS Marine Sulphur Queen, a 524-foot tanker carrying 39 men and over 15,000 tons of molten sulfur, sent a completely ordinary radio message, giving its coordinates. Then, the ship went silent. The Coast Guard launched an extensive 19-day search across the Straits of Florida. They found no ship, no crew, and received no distress calls. All that surfaced from the rough seas were a few scattered life preservers and a nameplate. This sudden, traceless vanishing made perfect fodder for conspiracy theorists. A year later, author Vincent Gaddis used the Marine Sulphur Queen as a cornerstone for what he called the Bermuda Triangle, claiming she simply sailed into the unknown. The vessel's highly modified engineering provides a far more concrete explanation than any myth. Its actual route bypassed the Bermuda Triangle entirely, steering instead toward a catastrophic failure built directly into its hull. Just before setting sail on that final voyage, one new crewman took a look at his ship, turned to his wife, and offered a terrifying assessment. He called it a floating garbage can. The vessel began its life in 1944 as a standard T2 class oil tanker built for the Second World War. But even by 1946, the federal government had published reports warning of critical construction flaws across the entire welded steel T2 merchant fleet. This structural schematic illustrates a major flaw inspectors called a weak back. High stress and corrosion made the midship keel area of T2 tankers extremely prone to fracturing. In heavy seas, these vessels had a tendency to literally snap in half. Despite knowing this risk, the ship's owners ordered a massive conversion in 1960. To hold over 15,000 tons of liquid sulfur, engineers gutted the vessel. They removed the internal transverse bulkheads, the structural ribs that gave the ship its strength, and replaced them with a single continuous 306-foot tank. Look closely at this 2-foot void space surrounding the central tank. Molten sulfur must be kept at roughly 255 degrees Fahrenheit to stop it from hardening. To accomplish this, a dense network of pressurized steam pipes was threaded throughout the ship, surrounding the superheated central tank. This heat created terrible operating conditions. Liquid sulfur regularly leaked from the pipes, pooling and caking around the ship's vital equipment. On one occasion, hardened sulfur completely shorted out a major electrical generator. This combination of a weakened keel, removed internal bulkheads, and a superheated, volatile cargo turned the Marine Sulphur Queen into a structurally doomed vessel. Conditions on board the ship were horrific. According to former crewmen, fires frequently broke out beneath and along the sides of the massive sulfur tanks. The blazes were so common that the ship's officers eventually stopped sounding the fire alarms. The maintenance log was a list of ignored omens. The ship sailed with ruptured steam coils, inoperable temperature gauges, and worn packing. It was actually scheduled for a crucial dry dock inspection in January of 1963, but the owners explicitly delayed it because cargo deliveries were falling behind. When the Coast Guard investigated the disappearance, they determined the ship was completely unsafe and should never have left port. Without survivors or a physical hull to examine, investigators narrowed the vessel's destruction down to 4 possible scenarios. This diagram shows the leading theories. The first possibility is a massive explosion inside the volatile cargo tanks. The second theory, seen here, is a complete failure of the ship's hull girder. Battered by 16-foot winter waves, the vessel's highly compromised weak back could have snapped in two. Now looking at a cross-sectional front view, we see the third theory, synchronous rolling. The central sulfur tank was narrow, creating a dangerously high center of gravity. If the ship rolled too far in heady seas, it couldn't recover and would capsize. The fourth possibility was a massive steam explosion, triggered if seawater violently breached the void space and hit the superheated tanks. Each of these scenarios points to the same underlying vulnerability. The specific mode of failure was simply the final symptom of systemic mechanical rot and an ownership group prioritizing tight schedules over the lives of their crew. In their final report, the U.S. Coast Guard delivered a damning conclusion. The Marine Sulphur Queen was entirely unseaworthy long before it ever cast off its mooring lines. The disaster prompted strict regulatory action. The Coast Guard mandated that no remaining T2 tanker could ever be converted to a bulk carrier without rigorous oversight of its original structural integrity and age. Within weeks of the sinking, the families of the 39 lost crewmen filed lawsuits. The litigation dragged on for a decade, with the families eventually seeking up to $20 million in damages under maritime unseaworthiness laws. The United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit ultimately ruled in favor of the families. They found the owners liable, citing the high center of gravity, the terrible maintenance record, and its deeply compromised design. But the families hit a bitter legal catch-22. The court awarded standard damages, but denied them punitive damages. Because the ship sank so fast and so completely, investigators could never prove exactly which specific failure struck the final blow. As the court wrote, no one knows how the ship was lost. The records of the Marine Sulphur Queen reveal a tragedy of corporate negligence rather than a mystery of the deep. In the end, 39 sailors were lost to a boardroom decision that prioritized profit margins over the most basic requirements of maritime safety.